Mitchell Stankovic and Associates and the Underground Ideas into Action presents The Underground Chats, authentic conversations with credit union thought leaders. Today's chat, Leading for the Membership, with Caroline Willard, President and CEO of the Cornerstone Credit Union League.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to see you, Caroline. How are you? How's the credit? How's all of your credit unions, and how are you guys doing?
Yeah, it's Sue. I'm so grateful to be here, and I always look forward to any chance I have to reconnect with you. And we've known each other for a long time, so happy to be here. Things are good, don't we all say that with some trepidation these days? Like, what shoe's gonna drop, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, but we, like even today, we had a meeting of our engagement team, and every year we get a few requests for dues waivers for credit unions, maybe who aren't having a great year and need to ask for some forbearance. And I was really pleased that our credit unions, certainly there were some requests, but they've fared pretty well through the pandemic, and the resulting, certainly delinquencies are a little bit up, charge-offs are a little bit up, capital's way up, just because, or assets, I should say, because of the inflow of deposits, and that's impacting capital ratios, but by and large, they're healthier than we thought they might be at this point. And so I'm feeling this immense sense of relief and gratitude today. So that's, if you see a bigger smile on my face than normal, that's probably what that's from.
Well, that's fabulous. And you were right when you were talking about assets are up. I just wanted to follow up. You've got such a diversity of size credit unions and, throughout your market, your region. So I think that net worth is going to be one of those things we're all going to keep an eye on this next year, huh?
It is. And, we've seen like the average today of asset growth was about 10% year over year, which is substantial. But, capital ratios have, we went into this very strong. We went into this with about 11.5% on average capital ratios. And so they've stayed pretty strong. We've seen 100, 200 basis point hits here and there, but I'm really proud of what our credit unions have done. Certainly, you see some interesting, huge amounts of growth. Randolph Brooks Credit Union, that's our largest federal credit union. They are now up to 13 billion in assets, and that was really a really fast run up. But 80% of our credit unions are smaller than 100 million in assets, so we've got a lot of smaller ones too.
Yeah. And, like you said, I think that the smaller ones are experiencing the growth. And fortunately, most of them went into this with a good net worth, good capital. So we're going to be able to navigate that. I think the end of 2021 is going to put us in a position to really see what that landscape looks like. And hopefully in your role and in the role with our from an advocacy standpoint, that the regulatory agencies stay consistent with the position they've had to recognize that this growth is good. It demonstrates trust in our movement. So tell me a little bit about Cornerstone as it is today, because it's really evolved.
It has, and we were formed in 2013 from the combination of the Oklahoma Credit Union League, the Arkansas Credit Union League, and of course, Texas Credit Union Leagues. And so we are hovering right around 500 credit unions. So there are a lot, but as I mentioned, a lot of them are smaller. And the interesting thing I think about this region is that because we cover such an immense geographic landscape, just in terms of sheer square miles, it's a lot. That there are a lot of really small rural credit unions, and they're really not on a path towards merging with another credit union because they are the credit union for a small municipality or town. And so the makeup of our credit unions is a little different than, certainly I grew up in California. I'm used to kind of larger credit unions. And so I think we've evolved appropriately in understanding how to serve that demographic with relevant educational support. We have, for example, asset and liability management consulting, and for a lot of smaller credit unions, we're it, right? We are their ALM program. They don't. Some of them don't even have CFOs. They have a CEO and a couple of operations people, and that's really it. So it's interesting. This part of what I love about this movement is that there is such diversity amongst not just the people who work there, but the institutions themselves are uniquely shaped in order to match up with their communities. And so we definitely see that reflected here in the Cornerstone region.
That's such an interesting topic for me, and it's one that I just for a minute want to dig deeper on. We're seeing this movement or this feeling of the smaller credit unions going away. And one of the discussion points that we've been having across the industry is, what do we do to ensure that we have a good, strong, healthy, not only growth of our credit unions in general, but maintain our grassroots. And your point just now about rural representation was so important. And I have to tell you, somewhat unique of what I'm hearing in terms of not just the way the geographic spread, but your commitment, your continued commitment to the group of credit unions, the diversity of the group of credit unions. Are you seeing that as well?
We definitely are. And it almost turns us into two different leagues, because we've got sort of a support system for the smaller credit unions, and that looks very different than the advocacy support, which is really where the larger credit unions engage the most. They have the manpower or people power in order to send folks to Washington, D.C. and to each of our state houses, and they really engage in advocacy. But at the small end, it's really about supporting, nurturing, helping to grow. And, it's my belief that if some of those rural credit unions weren't there, we would have banking deserts. And that would be a tragedy for rural America, for folks who would have to drive 50 or 100 miles to get to the nearest financial institution. So I really take that seriously, that we need to ensure that those financial services, those low-cost credit union financial services, are available in these communities, because that may be the only choice. And we don't, frankly, there's an argument that maybe that would be better served by fintechs, but I still believe that a community-based financial institution is a really important part of the fabric of any community.
I believe also that it's thought leadership that takes you back to the, if you will, the segmentation and the understanding that hometown, is represented best when it has hometown people doing it. And I was thinking about the social issues that we've had to navigate, across the country. And I know that you're actively involved in DEI. And in some ways, what we just talked about with diversity helps, is a compelling argument, if you will, about diversity of thought. I mean, the idea of having two separate segments that are so important to your representation was incredible. That's great. And then we know that we have DEI initiatives when it comes to all aspects of what's taking place, because our consumers, our members are changing. So you've been a leader in that. You've stood up and made sure that Cornerstone was involved. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
And thank you for the nod. It's been a complicated journey, because not everyone's moving at the same pace, and so I've had to understand that every time I speak, I'm speaking for my membership, and so I think we've done a lot to offer up education, offer up. You called it thought leadership. I will borrow your word there, your phrase. In that, the more diverse we are and the more we reflect our communities, the better we serve our communities. And so I think that from an institutional standpoint, I think that's incredibly important. I love what Rodney Hood is doing, for example, on the NCUA board in championing minority depository institutions, right? That's an important thing on an institutional level. But on a staff level, we are not going to attract good talent if we are trying to recruit and we're trying to recruit people who are diverse and they don't see any diversity on the existing team. And so if we're to serve our communities well, we've got to own up to that and really understand that diversity is what makes us stronger. It makes us make better decisions, and it definitely reflects our communities. So I know that's been something that's been brewing for me for a few years. We've and you know about this. We've had a very strong women's leadership movement in the Cornerstone region for some years now. Well, now we have morphed that, and we're, for example, what used to be our women's leadership conference is now merging into one that's called Inclusion. And it's really about DEI on all levels, not just gender, not just race, sexual orientation, certainly socioeconomic strata. So we believe that we need to do a good job of that. And is it necessarily the league's role? I don't know, but we are offering up the education that just it sort of helps people understand the issues around it, and it's been a good journey. It's been a good journey. And I know that also as a movement, I'm super engrossed in that too, in that CUNA has developed, I'm on the CUNA board, and CUNA has embraced DEI as a possible 8th cooperative principle, right? And the league presidents have partnered with the African American Credit Union Coalition, and I think that's important because we've got to lock arms and we've got to all make a commitment toward doing better.
You made the comment about, I don't know if it's our role. I think that's something that I faced with daily in the way that I literally, as you know, ask the questions and kind of poke the bear, get people to think a little bit deeper about ideas. But I believe that we as a society are changing. And so being relevant isn't just about tactical things. It's also being about anticipating the changes that will happen. And so lanes will merge. All right. Your point about women, when people ask about my transition from the chair to really looking at DEI on a broader level, it's been something that I believed in for years. We were just focused in an area. And so I'm appreciative of what you're doing with the broader movement. And I also believe that we collectively have to understand that in order to push forward, we have to have not only our community, whatever that is, community of credit unions, community of, to serve the deserts, as you've indicated, but our communities based upon gender or, sexual orientation or race. All of those communities are important, but we have to have our allies. And we have to have the people that will bring strategic influence. And I know that those roles are tough sometimes because I have to learn. I'm lucky enough to work with Zach and the Seed Pride Initiative and getting that started. So I'm learning. I'm very much learning about the LGBTQ community. And so that's a process that I think what I have said, that was my lane or my role a few years ago. No, but a few years ago I was awakened in a different way. So I appreciate that. And I love the fact that you're making it more relevant. One of the controversial subjects I think that we're all faced with, and even when I mentioned to you, talking to credit unions about vaccines, and I got my vaccine, but people are drawing lines and in some ways more divided. that we've seen, and you're certainly in, one of the regions that you're dealing with that on a day-to-day basis. Tell me a little bit about how you've navigated that within Cornerstone with your membership and your employees.
Well, it has been one of the trickier journeys that I've had to navigate in my career. And not because I'm trying to wordsmith my way through it, but because I understand that I run a democratic organization, right? People choose to belong to the league based on our value proposition. And so I'll give you, for instance, on January 6th, when there was the Capitol insurrection, immediately I started getting questions afterwards about, we run 3 different PACs, political action committees, and we contribute to QLAC, which is the federal political action committee that CUNA runs. And by being the steward of all of those funds, we have to make tough decisions all the time. I mean, this is part of a league's role, is to vet candidates, to understand which candidates are supportive of credit union issues, and which of them maybe are neutral and which of them are actually hostile because they may be a former banker. And so we've been doing that for a long time. But immediately after January 6th, we started getting questions about, well, are you going to give money to, we have a certain senator who was very visible during the insurrection. Are you going to give money to that senator ever again? And my first reaction was, well, of course we are, because that person has indicated that he is supportive of credit union values. And then we paused, because I don't think a pat answer works when the world is upside down. And so we paused, we gathered together our government affairs committee, and we said, all right, we're getting these questions about, which candidates we support and to what degree. And, frankly, if all of the movement, the credit union movement, decided to stop supporting those who voted against certifying the electoral college votes, that would have been 147 members of Congress that suddenly we weren't supporting. And so that would have handicapped us on a very practical level. That was the argument, that, we have these elected officials, and sometimes they're going to say or do things we don't like. And what do we do? And so the pause was helpful. It was helpful on a local level. And we also bubbled it up to QLAC, to that leadership, which is, within CUNA, they've got some brilliant minds there who help guide us. And we have one of our Cornerstone employees is on the board of trustees. And so we bubbled that up. We said, CUNA had already decided to pause. We had already decided to pause contributions, but let's have a conversation. Is there a higher standard to which we hold our elected officials moving forward? And if so, what's the rubric? How do we decide what that higher standard is and when to apply it? And I can't say that we've developed if-then statements, but there certainly is going to be more thoughtfulness going forward about how we view a particular incumbent or candidate's behavior, and if it's in keeping with credit union values. I guess that's a very broad way of saying that we reserve the right, if there's something really abhorrent that's happened, that we can make some different decisions about whether we fund those types of candidates. And we're threading a needle a little bit, but I'm proud of the credit union community for having the conversation, because what we don't want to do is make this country any more divided than it already is. And there are a lot of slippery slope topics where if we say that we're siding on this side or that side, then suddenly credit unions are aligned and polarized from the other side. And we're trying to avoid that. But it's been a little painful, frankly, because people they feel their political affiliation, I think, more than ever. And so having to navigate through that and still do what is right for credit unions has been really complicated. But I think we've landed in a good place where we can be more thoughtful about it, and yet we're not drawing any lines in the sand that we would, frankly, there are a lot of Fortune 500 companies who said, well, we're never giving to so-and-so. ever again. And so they're already walking that back. And so then that looks inauthentic, and we didn't want that either. So I'm glad you asked the question, and I know that's a long answer, but it's been really instructive about how to lead through times of discourse that's really painful and difficult for the whole country.
I believe what you were talking about, the idea also is probably part of what we were just talking about as far as inclusiveness, because once you draw the line, you're excluding people, right? And we know we don't want to do that. But leadership is so much more complex today. It's not an autocratic society. It's not a yes, do it this way, no, do it that way, black and white, and so on. And with the idea that you're also going to somehow in the equation include values, okay, of what it means to be a credit union and what that it represents for consumers. I don't know how you do that all the time, but I think that having that again as the cornerstone of how you're going to make your decisions, to me, is reflective of leadership that's more emotionally intelligent, more in tune with what's taking place in the industry. And some issues we can debate. There are some hard no's, right? I tell my grandchildren this, that, you could debate with grandma on whether or not you get a popsicle, but you can't debate with me on whether you run out in the street. Right. So, yeah. And I mean, those are obviously very benign type examples, but the point being that each of us has those hard rules, right? And they're based upon safety. They're based upon so many different things when we're in our upbringing. But I believe that's what happened in last year is these lines got drawn. And one of my, I think, biggest red flag was that when you start to draw lines, we're not talking about inclusivity anymore. We're talking about excluding people. So I appreciate the fact that you shared that journey and how thoughtful the leadership's being.
Yeah, it was interesting. And I think one word that I keep coming back to in the last year is nuance. That very few decisions on these types of topics are binary. There is a spectrum of positions that you can take. And I think as a leader, I've had to learn to be a much more thoughtful listener, because I've really got to hear what my membership is asking for. And a good friend of mine who's I think one of the wiser CEOs out there once told me, Caroline, you've got to do what's right for the membership, not just for the member. And I've heeded that advice over the last year. Well, since she told me, but especially over the last year, because there are always going to be squeaky wheels. There are always going to be people who are on one extreme or the other. But without just trying to be a fence sitter, I think we've got to be thoughtful leaders and listen for nuance.
Yeah. Well, equity and equality, are two different things. And I think we have to be equitable, and then people have to step in to make sure that they are contributing at an equal level and doing all the things that make society strong. So I don't think this is going away. I think the complexity of leadership has now, if you will, put us in a position that we have to consider so many aspects, so multidimensional. I know it's affecting the way that I have an opportunity to work with boards and to see how important some of these issues are going to be. It was easier before to kind of go with the regulatory position or go with this position. Now it's all about your membership and who do you represent? And I think that's going to be complex for them as well. Yeah. So if you were to tell our audience, like, what ideas you want to put into action, the two things that are, that come to mind, what would they be?
Well, we've touched on one of them, and I'm not exactly sure how to put it into words, but I would like to see credit unions be a microcosm of the greater society. I would like to see credit unions embrace nuance and inclusion, and in doing so, I think it makes good business sense, frankly, because if we're reflecting our communities, we better serve our communities. And so that has a lot to do, though, with making people feel welcome. And so it all is very much tied up in inclusion. So I love that. And then on a more operational level, because let's face it, we do have institutions to run. I know that there were a lot of lessons learned in 2020, and credit unions had to adapt so quickly, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, within a week of the pandemic being declared, I saw credit unions instantly. Well, they were figuring out how to set appointments and sign loan docs in the parking lot and use their drive-throughs in ways they never had, and mobile notaries. And I mean, there was so much adaptation. And I think there's, with some, not all, but with some, there's this desire to want to snap back to how we were before. And I don't think that's wise. I don't think we go through something like this without having learned things that are going to serve us well moving forward. And so, whether it's better implementation of digital banking or allowing more remote employees, because that pendulum, I'm already starting to see it swing back. I'm already starting to see commercial space tightening back up again in the Plano market where we are. Because people are saying, well, we thought we were all going to be remote, and now we all want to go back. Well, where is that pendulum going to settle? And we need to make good use of the painful lessons that we learned in 2020 and not just snap back to what feels comfortable, because I think we can grow from all this. And God help us, we need to grow from all of this. There needs to be a win out of all of what we've been through. And so that would be an idea I'd want to put into action, is that we take every hard lesson and figure out, well, what does that do to make us stronger, and what do we hold on to that may not be immediately comfortable, but is really better for us in the long term.
Therein lies the response to how do we make systemic change? How do we start to really see an ongoing progress to an area that is often event driven? Because you can look at 2020 as a big event that now we're going to move past, or we can look at it as an opportunity to have actually been through something that we come through and we understand that it's not going to go away. It's a different world today than it was when we left DC last year. And what does that mean to us individually, organizationally, and for our community and our industry? You mentioned earlier about the corporate America. I think corporate America is absolutely going to see the rubber hit the road. And I'm going to be very interested to see how we come out of this in that direction. How are we going to navigate the future for all of us? And then you talk about the hybrid, if you will. Some of these terms are so overused, I hesitate to even bring it up. But the whole idea that I want a seamless experience, and I also want love. Okay. And I want my financial institutions to care about me. So use your technology to figure out how to personalize it and care about me. And if you do that, we'll help bridge some of this. And so I'm excited about the ones you said. I think nuance is so important, and the whole idea of let's not go back. We're not going to go back, and I don't want to be in traffic. I'm not going to fly just for a 2-hour meeting anymore. I mean, there are things that have changed. And I think we can be good at that, but I am looking forward to getting together and all of us writing on the back of that napkin again, So, yeah. So we want to ask you a question. If you were to, we're going to be doing on July 13th, our We Are the World Next Collision. And we're going to be asking people to respond to the question, the world would be a better place if, or you could choose, what do you think the world would look like without a credit union movement? So you tell us.
Yeah, and I think the world would, I'm going to choose that one. The world would be a better place if we all take a snapshot of where we are right now. And I know I just got to see my parents this last weekend for the first time in a long time, and take a snapshot of how it felt to be that isolated and how appreciative we are of human connection. Because time will pass and we won't have that same sense of angst and longing. And I know for me, it has changed me. It has made me appreciate human connection. It has made me appreciate my relationships, my friendships so much more. And it has also made me realize how much we all need to lean on each other. And so I think the world would be a better place if we all take that snapshot and think how grateful we are for the connections that we have in our lives. And that makes us better human beings. It certainly makes us better leaders within this movement. And so that's one thing I'm going to take away.
Well, you just touched my heart. I was just thinking that you said earlier things are going well, and we're all wondering if the next shoe's going to drop, because you've been through storms. You've been through so much in your region that it's like, oh, I was thinking that this weekend, that I'm so grateful, and I want to just enjoy and embrace this moment so that I can remember it and know that that's what's important.
Right.
So the human experience continues, huh? Our human connections. And
Yeah.
I sure want to thank you for this. I appreciate your leadership, and I appreciate you tackling some tough conversations here in a very articulate way. Yeah.
Thank you. And I appreciate that you create a safe space for that, Sue. I think that our movement needs this. We need to challenge one another, and we need to take a hard look at how well we're responding to really difficult outside events. And if we do that well, we will be so much stronger for it. So I'm glad you make space for it.
Thank you very much. And, when we started this, there was the idea that collision, controversy, debate, and the evolution for me probably came from a place of, I really care. And so the idea of debating and maybe potentially making it hurtful or taking a position was never an intention. And I'm finding that because of that, there's a trust level now, that what we're doing is to make all of us better, and to really, if you will, create an environment where we can talk about things. And even in this case, for us to record, it's very difficult to watch myself on the, let alone have somebody else know that they're being recorded. But creating a safe place for people to reach out and say, hey, I think we could be better, and hey, this is how we navigated it, is a way of us sharing. So thank you for that. I appreciate it very much. The whole underground movement is committed to the belief in credit unions and changing lives. So it's fabulous.
Proud of what you've done. I'm proud of your new role, and you're making this movement a better place.
Thank you, my friend. You go have a wonderful day. We appreciate so much you spending time with us today. Okay?
Okay, thanks so much.